Within this lecture, we will continue our discussion of comma errors in student writing. Specifically, we are going to be examining commas and items in a list. Once we have discussed this common error, we will then move on to discussing issues that occur with parallelism. Let's begin with commas and items in a list. Consider the following example. At the pet store, I bought a parrot and a fish. Within this sentence, we have a list of items. We have a parrot as well as a fish. When we have two or fewer items, we do not need to insert commas. However, if we have more than two items, we will. For instance, if we bought a parrot, a fish, and a snake, we would have a minimum of 3 items. If we have 3 or more items, we need to place commas between those items. Within this example, we would have a comma after parrot and a comma after fish. In looking at this sentence, take particular note of the comma before our coordinating conjunction and. This comma is called the Oxford comma. Not all style guides require its use, however, we should be familiar with it and implement it when it helps to eliminate confusion. Consider the following example. I love my siblings, Little Red Riding Hood and the Mad Hatter. Within this example, you can see that we have not used the Oxford comma. In this instance, not using the Oxford comma makes it appear as if Little Red Riding Hood and the Mad Hatter are my siblings. This, however, is not the case. When we insert the Oxford comma, we make it clear that this is a list of 3 items that I love. When we are trying to identify items in a list, it helps to know that these items might be words, as we have seen in the previous examples, they may be phrases, or they may be clauses. In order to illustrate this, let's take a look at the following example. I looked for the remote under the couch, behind the TV, and in the garbage. Within this example, we should note that there are 3 prepositions: under, behind, and in. Prepositions indicate the beginning of a prepositional phrase. Prepositional phrases begin with a preposition and end with a noun. Therefore, within this sentence, we have 3 prepositional phrases: under the couch, behind the TV, and in the garbage. Since we have 3 prepositional phrases, we need to include a comma between each of these items. The final sentence would then read, I looked for the remote under the couch, comma, behind the TV, comma, and in the garbage. Let's look at one final example. The people who flew a great distance, who saw the sights, and who ate the local food were not disappointed. Within this sentence, we'll note that there are 3 clauses: who flew a great distance, who saw the sights, and who ate the local food. We know these are clauses because each possesses a subject and a verb: who flew, who saw, and who ate. Since we have 3 or more clauses within the sentence, we need to place commas between each of these items. The final sentence would then read, the people who flew a great distance, comma, who saw the sights, comma, and who ate the local food were not disappointed. Remember that when we are looking at errors with commas and items in a list, we must have 3 or more items in order to use commas, and these items can be words, phrases, or clauses. Let's now discuss some of the issues that arise with parallelism. In the previous examples, we saw 3 sentences, all of which contained items in a list. In the first sentence, each of the items were a noun. In our second example, each of the items were prepositional phrases, and in the third sentence, each of the items were clauses. Within each of these sentences, we should also note the coordinating conjunction and. When looking for issues with parallelism, coordinating conjunctions are important because they indicate that we are joining two elements. Our coordinating conjunctions can be remembered by the term Fanboys. Fanboys is an acronym for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. When we see these coordinating conjunctions within a sentence, we should ensure that the elements that are being coordinated are parallel. In order to illustrate this, let's take a look at an example. The boat sailed quickly, but with care. Within this sentence, we should be able to note the coordinating conjunction but. Here the term but is joining two elements. What elements is but coordinating? But is coordinating the word quickly as well as with care. When we are looking for errors with parallelism, we need to make sure that the items on either side of our coordinating conjunction are balanced or are parallel. Here we have the term quickly, which is an adverb, and a prepositional phrase, with care. These two terms are not parallel. Therefore, we need to change one of these so that it agrees with the other. What term could stand in for with care? Carefully is a word that could stand in for with care. This term would also fix the error that we have with parallelism because both quickly and carefully are adverbs. The final sentence would then read, "The boat sailed quickly but carefully." Let's take a look at another example. The boy wearing the orange shirt and who is flying the kite is my son. Within this sentence, try to identify the coordinating conjunction. We can hopefully identify the word and as a coordinating conjunction. We now need to ensure that the elements on either side of this and are parallel. What elements are we trying to coordinate within this sentence? We can hopefully identify wearing the orange shirt and who is flying the kite as the two elements we are trying to coordinate. We now need to determine whether these elements are parallel. The first element would be considered a phrase because the word ends in ing. Our second element would be considered a clause because it possesses a subject and a verb. Since we are trying to join a phrase and a clause, these two items would not be parallel. There are two methods by which we can fix the error within this particular sentence. We could make both elements into clauses. The boy who is wearing the orange shirt and who is flying the kite is my son. These coordinated elements would both be considered clauses because both possess a subject and a verb. Since these items are both clauses, the coordinating conjunction would be joining two elements that are now parallel. In addition to making these clauses, we could also make these two elements into phrases. The boy wearing the orange shirt and flying the kite is my son. Within this example, we have two phrases, both of which are ending with ing. These elements, as with the elements in the previous example, would be considered parallel. Let's look at one last example before we review what we have gone over this lecture. Singing songs, playing games, and drives in the rain are my favorite activities. Within this sentence, let's attempt to identify our coordinating conjunction. We should be able to identify and relatively easily. Now that we have identified our coordinating conjunction, what elements are we attempting to coordinate? We are attempting to coordinate drives in the rain, playing games, and singing songs. Here we have 3 elements we are trying to make parallel. 2 of these items begin with a word that ends in ing, singing and playing. The 3rd item begins with a noun, drives. Since these elements are not parallel, we will need to change the latter of these so that it agrees with the previous 2. Singing songs, playing games, and driving in the rain are my favorite activities. In addition to this parallelism issue, you may have also noticed that there is a comma error within this sentence. As previously noted, we have 3 items. Since we have 3 or more items, we need to place commas between each of those items. The final version would read, singing songs, comma, playing games, comma, and driving in the rain are my favorite activities. Let's quickly review the concepts that we have looked over so far this lecture. Within this lecture, we have learned about items in a list and how to incorporate them with commas, as well as how to avoid errors with parallelism. When we are examining items in a list, if we have 3 or more items, we will need to place commas between each of those items. These items may be words, they may be phrases, or they may be clauses. We should also place a comma before our coordinating conjunction in order to avoid clarity issues. Coordinating conjunctions are also important when looking at parallelism. When there is a coordinating conjunction within the sentence, we need to be sure that the elements on either side of that coordinating conjunction are balanced or are parallel. As with items in a list, these elements may be words, phrases, or clauses. If the elements on either side of a coordinating conjunction are not equal, such as a word and a phrase, it means that we have an error with our parallelism. In order to correct this, we should make sure that the elements on either side of coordinating conjunctions are always equal. Before we conclude this lecture, let's look at a few example sentences to solidify the knowledge of what we have learned thus far. After going to the store, I realized I forgot milk, eggs, and cheese. See if you can identify the error within this sentence. Hopefully, you will be able to identify the list at the end of this sentence: milk, eggs, and cheese. As we have 3 or more items, we need to ensure that we have a comma between each of these items. Therefore, we will add a comma after eggs. After going to the store, I realized I forgot milk, comma, eggs, comma, and cheese. The Stevensons like hosting and to eat out. See if you can identify the error within this sentence. As we only have 2 items, we should hone in on our coordinating conjunction and begin looking for errors with parallelism. Here we'll note that we have to eat out coordinating with hosting. These 2 elements are not equal and need to be adjusted. There are 2 ways by which we can fix this error. Let's consider the first. The Stevensons like hosting and eating out. Here, the coordinated elements both end in ing. Therefore, this fixed the error that we have with parallelism. The other manner by which we can fix this error is the following. The Stevensons like to host and to eat out. Here we have 2 phrases, both of which are to plus a verb. Therefore, this example would also be considered parallel. Let's look at one additional example. Seeking the truth, the desire to empathize with others, and humility are important hallmarks of maturity. See if you can identify any errors within this sentence. We should note the coordinating conjunction and, indicating that we need to pay attention to parallelism. Within this sentence, what elements are we attempting to make parallel? We can hopefully identify seeking the truth, the desire to empathize with others, and humility as the elements we are attempting to coordinate. These elements, however, appear to have an error with parallelism. The first element ends in ing and is therefore a phrase. The second element possesses a noun and a modifier, and the last element, humility, is a single word. As these coordinated items are not parallel, we need to adjust this sentence. Seeking the truth, empathizing with others, and practicing humility are important hallmarks of maturity. These revisions fix the error with the previous version. Each of these items begins with a word that ends in ing: seeking, empathizing, and practicing. You hopefully also identified that we have 3 or more items within the sentence, meaning that we need to include a comma before our coordinating conjunction. The final version would then read, seeking the truth, comma, empathizing with others, comma, and practicing humility are important hallmarks of maturity. Hopefully, after watching this lecture, you have a better understanding of how to find and fix errors with parallelism, as well as how to find and fix errors with commas and items in a list.